The galaxy did not notice at first when the humans grew quiet because humanity had always been loud in its ways, filling the council halls with arguments, filling the trade lanes with ships, and filling the battlefield with fire, yet slowly, and without warning, the noise of humanity began to fade. Their diplomats stopped appearing at meetings, their traders vanished from the common routes, their fleets no longer answered hails. At first the council thought it was arrogance or a game of politics, but then the silence deepened and turned into something no one could explain. On the surface of Earth, cities that once pulsed with lights dimmed as towers went dark. Entire districts emptied of people. Ships lifted into the skies and vanished into the black void without broadcasting destination codes. Satellites that had always crowded the orbit disappeared one after another, until only emptiness remained on maps. Colonies across nearby stars reported the same silence. One day people were there, the next day they were gone. It was as if humanity had decided to walk away from the galaxy, leaving nothing behind but shadows. In the council chamber, many voices argued. The Valari ambassador insisted that humans were preparing for war. The Torani senator claimed humans had suffered some disaster. Others whispered that perhaps humans had simply grown tired of being mistrusted and insulted by other races. No one could agree, but everyone felt the same growing fear because nothing frightened the galaxy more than not knowing what humanity was doing. Their unpredictability had always been their power, and now their silence made that power limitless among the humans themselves. There was no panic, only purpose. Families packed their lives into ships, workers loaded massive freighters with supplies, soldiers boarded transports without question. Leaders gave orders in calm voices and the people obeyed. No explanations were given and none were needed. Those who asked why received only silence, because the plan was larger than individuals, larger than nations. It was something carried by all of humanity together. They did not need the galaxy to understand. They only needed to move forward. In a quiet hangar on the far side of the moon, a young pilot named Aaron watched as his squadron prepared their crafts. He had grown up flying patrol routes near Mars, but now his orders were different. There would be no more patrols, no more shows of strength to the council. Instead, he and his wing would leave without broadcasting, without warning, into uncharted space. When he asked his commander where they were going, she only replied, "Far enough." Aaron looked once more at the Earth below, glowing blue and green, and then he closed his visor and followed the fleet into the dark. The absence of humanity became a wound in the galaxy. Trade routes collapsed. Entire colonies that had relied on human goods began to wither without supply. Pirates grew bolder without human patrols to deter them. Border skirmishes flared as old rivalries reignited. The council tried to hold order, but without human presence, their words carried less weight than before. Every race had measured its actions by what humanity might do, and now without that measure, chaos began to spread quietly and unstoppably. Some among the galaxy celebrated. They said good riddance to the Deathworlders who brought danger wherever they went. They claimed the galaxy was safer without human stubbornness and aggression. Yet even as they cheered, they locked their doors tighter and built their fleets faster, because deep inside they did not believe humanity was truly gone. They believed the silence was only the first step of something greater and darker, and that belief spread more fear than open war ever could. On a barren rock beyond the rim, vast caverns had been carved by human machines. Entire cities hidden underground, lit by artificial suns. Here millions of humans gathered, building something unseen by alien eyes. Ships larger than any the council fleets had ever fielded rose from dry docks. Weapons of strange design were tested in silence. Families lived in calm routines above them. Leaders met in shadowed halls, speaking in quiet tones. They were not exiles. They were not defeated. They were preparing because the future demanded it. Back in the council chambers, paranoia took root. The Coran accused the Valari of conspiring with humans. The Valari accused the Torani of harboring human fleets. Old alliances shattered as blame spread. Senators shouted until their voices broke, but none could produce proof of where humanity had gone. They searched abandoned colonies. They scanned the silent systems. They sent spies who never returned. The more they searched, the less they found, and the less they found, the more they feared, because humanity had not left wreckage or signals. Only silence, and silence was a weapon. No one knew how to fight. Aaron sat in the cockpit of his fighter, deep In an uncharted nebula around him, hundreds of ships floated, engines cold, waiting for orders. He listened to the hum of his systems and thought of the Earth he had left behind. It had not been a farewell. It had been a beginning. Humanity had chosen silence not as an end, but as a shield and a promise. When the time came, the galaxy would learn why they had walked away, but until then, they would wait. And in that waiting, their silence shook the stars. The stars along the edge of the trade route seemed quieter than before, and even the stations that once welcomed travelers with bright lights now looked empty and cold. The aliens who crossed those routes felt a strange unease, because the human ships that were always there were no longer seen. For years, humanity had filled the space lanes with their freighters and patrol craft, and they had brought goods, ideas, and protection. But now they were leaving, and no one could understand why. Commander Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge of a station that orbited a neutral world, and he looked at the scanners again, hoping to see at least one human ship coming in. But there was nothing. His alien officers asked questions he could not answer, and he felt the weight of silence heavier each day. The council chambers that once heard human voices were now filled with arguments from other species. Some claimed that humans were preparing for war, and others believed they had found something beyond the rim of the galaxy. None of them had proof, and none of them could get any answers. When envoys reached out to human representatives, they were met with polite nods but no words. Ethan Carter and Olivia Brooks, who had once been the loudest human voices in the chamber, no longer argued. They simply attended meetings, listened in silence, and then left without saying anything. The aliens began to whisper that this silence was more dangerous than human anger because no one could predict what would happen next. Out in the colonies, strange things were happening. Human settlements were being closed down in an orderly fashion. Farms that once exported food to alien markets were shut. Power stations were dismantled, and the equipment was packed away. Cities that had been alive with noise and activity became ghost towns overnight. Those who tried to visit were shocked to find streets empty, houses sealed, and messages left that simply said farewell without any reason. The silence felt like a shadow stretching across the galaxy. Daniel Hayes received reports every day from scouts and merchants. They all told the same story. Entire human fleets were vanishing. Patrol ships withdrew from border regions without warning. Freighters stopped answering hails. Even the mighty carriers that once flew the human flag disappeared into unknown space. He ordered his team to track them, but they found nothing except traces of heavy traffic pointing away from the core and toward the dark reaches of the galactic rim. The commander could not sleep at night because the thought of billions of humans moving in silence without explanation was more terrifying than open war. In marketplaces, the alien merchants argued and cursed. They relied on human goods, human medicine, and human engineers who fixed things no one else understood. Now the supply lines were breaking down and the prices rose higher each week. Fear spread quickly as people realized they had taken human presence for granted. The humans had always been unpredictable, but they had also been reliable in ways that no one admitted before. Their sudden withdrawal felt like the ground itself was being pulled away. In one border sector, a large Orc ship was seen drifting slowly toward the rim. It was massive, larger than any known alien transport, and it carried millions of humans inside. The ship ignored every call. Alien captains sent desperate messages, but there was no reply. When some tried to follow, the human escorts warned them away with silent gestures, and then jumped into faster space without firing a single shot. This vision of a people quietly leaving made the galaxy shiver more than any battle could have done. Rumors spread like fire. Some claimed the humans had built a hidden empire beyond the rim. Others swore they had discovered a new energy source and were leaving to protect it. There were those who said the humans were preparing to unleash a weapon so great that even silence was a warning. But no rumor was confirmed and no answer was given. The mystery grew each day, and with it the fear. Kara Simmons, a scientist who had once worked on joint projects with alien researchers, was approached by an envoy from a desperate species. They begged her for an explanation, for some sign of what was coming, but she said nothing. She only looked at them with calm eyes and walked away. The envoy later told others that her silence was worse than a threat. because it carried weight like a mountain ready to fall. Every unanswered question became a stone in the chest of the galaxy. The Council tried to vote on sanctions and punishments, but without humans there to respond, the debates felt empty. Some species laughed and celebrated, saying the galaxy would be safer without the wild Deathworlders. Others warned that the humans had always balanced the powers, and without them, chaos would rise. Already, border wars were starting again, pirates were striking, and old enemies who once feared human fleets were preparing to fight. The silence of humanity echoed louder than cannons. Commander Hayes watched recordings of the abandoned colonies. He saw children's toys left in neat piles, schools empty but clean, gardens trimmed but lifeless. It was not the leaving of a broken people. It was the leaving of a people who had made a choice. That was what terrified him most. They were not running away in fear. They were walking away with purpose, and no one could guess what that purpose was. He tried to send a message to Admiral Lucas Grant, but there was no answer. Even the highest officers were silent. The galaxy grew darker with each passing day. Trade routes once bright with human traffic became lonely paths. Stations closed their doors. The chatter of markets fell quiet. Everywhere the same question was asked. Where are the humans going, and why will they not speak? The silence spread like an infection. The more the aliens demanded an answer, the more painful the silence became. It was as if the humans knew that words were weaker than quiet resolve. One night, Commander Hayes stood alone in the observation deck of the station. Through the glass, he saw a human convoy moving slowly toward the rim, thousands of lights against the dark. He raised his hand to the communicator and begged for a response. No voice came back. The ships passed in silence and disappeared into the unknown. His alien officers whispered behind him that the galaxy was changing forever, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. The silence had become the loudest sound in the stars. The galaxy filled with whispers and fear as more weeks passed, and still no human voices answered the endless calls. In the great cities of alien worlds, the markets were loud with rumor. One trader said the humans were building a hidden empire beyond the rim. Another swore they had discovered a way to open a gate to another universe. Old soldiers remembered the strange courage of humans in past wars and warned that their silence was not weakness, but preparation. No one agreed, and no one could prove anything. The unknown spread like fire through dry fields, and every mind felt the heat of it. On the council floor, the alien leaders argued each day. Some said humans had abandoned the galaxy forever. Others said they would return with weapons that could destroy whole systems. The fear made enemies accuse each other. A few smaller species begged for calm, but their voices were drowned. Without the humans to speak, the council had lost its balance. Each debate ended with more anger and less trust. Even the oldest diplomats admitted they had never felt so lost. Kara Simmons continued her work in a laboratory far from the core. She received visitors almost every day. They were scholars, envoys, even spies dressed as traders. They asked her why her people were leaving. They offered her wealth and safety if she would explain. She said nothing. She looked at them with the same steady eyes and continued her work. The silence that followed her became a legend among the aliens. They said one human word would be worth more than 1,000 fleets, and yet not a single word was spoken. In the Outer Systems, Commander Daniel Hayes tried to keep order on his station. Supplies were running low because the human convoys no longer stopped there. The alien crew grew restless and angry. Some whispered that Hayes knew more than he admitted. Others feared that the humans had abandoned them to die. He could not answer their questions because he had no answers himself. He sent message after message to the human command, but all he received was silence. Each unanswered call made him feel more like a ghost speaking into the void. The silence of humanity changed the behavior of other species. Pirates grew bolder, and their ships attacked trade lines once guarded by human patrols. Merchants paid higher fees for protection, and some worlds fell back into chaos. Rival empires tested each other's borders again, and small wars broke out. For years, humans had been the unpredictable factor that no one wanted to provoke. Without them, the old grudges returned like storms in a broken sky. The galaxy had depended on humans more than anyone wanted to admit, and now that truth became clear. On one cold night, an alien fleet spotted a massive movement of human ships. Arc vessels escorted by carriers and cruisers moved together in a slow river of light. The alien captains tried again and again to open a channel. They pleaded for answers. They even offered tribute if only the humans would speak. Not a single word came back. The ships passed without turning their weapons or changing course. The silence felt heavier than any battle cry. The alien crews returned to their homeworlds trembling and told their leaders that the humans were not just leaving, they were vanishing with purpose. The council met again in panic. Some leaders wanted to chase the humans and force them to answer. Others shouted that such a move would bring doom. Old records were studied. Every war with humans ended in blood and every alliance with them ended in strength. Yet none of those records could explain why humanity now chose silence. The mystery was worse than any open threat. A known danger could be prepared for, but an unknown one lived in every shadow. Even the most powerful rulers lay awake at night listening to the silence between the stars. Rumors spread further. On one world, a preacher claimed the humans had become gods and were ascending beyond the galaxy. On another world, a general warned that the humans were preparing to strike from the dark with weapons beyond imagination. Traders carried these stories across sectors, and each tale grew wilder than the last. The truth remained hidden, and that made every rumor feel possible. The silence gave birth to endless voices, and none of them were real, yet all of them caused fear. Commander Hayes looked at the faces of his crew and saw the same question in every eye. Why did the humans not speak? He remembered the council chamber months ago when Ethan Carter and Olivia Brooks had stood silent as accusations filled the hall. He remembered how they rose without anger and walked out without a word. That moment returned to him each night like a dream that would not fade. He began to wonder if that silence had been the first step of a plan that no one else understood. The thought chilled him more than any threat could have. On distant colonies, the pattern continued. Cities were emptied but left clean. Farms were harvested and closed. Machines were shut down carefully. The humans left no mess behind them. It was as if they wanted the galaxy to see their departure as an act of will and not of desperation. The aliens who visited these empty places reported, feeling watched even when no one was there. The silence clung to the walls, and the air itself seemed to hold the memory of human footsteps. Each empty city became a monument to a choice that no one could explain. The silence reached into hearts as much as into governments. Ordinary aliens, who had once lived beside humans, now felt abandoned. They remembered human laughter and stubbornness and strange courage. They remembered the way humans made friends and enemies with the same passion. To lose such neighbors without reason was like losing a part of the galaxy itself. Fear turned to sorrow, and sorrow turned to anger. Some cursed the humans for leaving. Others prayed they would return. All of them felt the weight of silence pressing down. As more Arc ships disappeared beyond the rim, the galaxy began to believe it would never see humans again. Some leaders took comfort in that thought. They told their people that the dangerous Deathworlders were gone for good. But their speeches were weak and unconvincing. Everyone knew that silence was not the same as defeat. The humans had not fallen. They had chosen to leave, and a choice made in silence carried a power that could not be measured. The fear of what might come next grew stronger each day. The stars were full of whispers, but none of them came from human lips. The galaxy waited in dread and hope for a voice that never came. The silence had become a storm, and its shadow stretched across every world. Humanity had turned its back on the council and walked away without a word. That simple act shook the hearts of billions more than any weapon could have done, and still no one knew why. The truth of the human departure began to show itself in the far reaches of space, where great fleets were seen moving in silence, and alien observers who dared to approach could only watch with awe as entire convoys of Arc ships escorted by warships drifted toward the rim of the galaxy without a word. These ships were so large and so many that the stars behind them seemed to vanish when they passed, and the sight of them carried a strange finality. It was clear that humanity was not scattering or fleeing in panic. They were moving with order, and purpose as if following a plan written long ago. The aliens who reported these sightings spoke in hushed tones, as though they had seen something sacred or terrifying. No one could deny it anymore. Humanity was leaving. Admiral Lucas Grant stood at the center of one of these operations. His command ship moved among the Ark vessels like a shepherd among flocks. Each Ark held millions of souls, families, scientists, workers, and soldiers who had left their homes without protest. The Admiral watched the displays and gave quiet orders, but he never opened the channels to the aliens who called again and again. They begged him for answers. They demanded reasons, they even threatened, but he said nothing. His silence was an iron wall, and behind it was the determination of a whole species. He knew the weight of that silence, but he also knew it was stronger than any weapon. Across the galaxy, alien ships followed the migration. Some tried to block the way, but the human escorts did not fire. They simply formed walls of steel and light and moved forward. The aliens were forced to turn aside without a fight. Some among them thought this restraint meant weakness, but others understood it was a sign of power greater than violence. To move billions without a single battle was to show that humanity no longer needed the Council or its wars. The quiet strength of their departure frightened even the bravest captains. In one sector, a desperate fleet of envoys launched from 3 worlds at once. They raced to catch a line of Ark ships and placed themselves in the path. Their leaders sent messages filled with pleas. They offered alliances, they promised forgiveness. They swore they would honor humanity if only they stayed. The human ships slowed but did not answer. For hours, the envoys cried out, but nothing came back. Finally, the human ships shifted course around them like a river flowing around stones. The envoys were left adrift, their words empty in the void. They returned to their worlds with despair, for they understood that the humans had made their choice long ago. On abandoned colonies, the silence grew heavier. Alien explorers walked through empty streets and felt the echo of footsteps that were no longer there. They found schools still full of books, factories clean but unused, gardens trimmed but without voices. It was as though the humans had only stepped away for a moment, yet they never returned. The explorers carried these images back to the Council, and when the recordings were shown, even the proudest leaders sat in silence. The images were more powerful than any speech. They showed that the humans had left with care, leaving behind order, not ruin, as though they wanted the galaxy to remember them not as destroyers, but as a people who had chosen their own road. Rumors became wilder with each day. Some swore that the humans had found a gate to another galaxy. Others said they were gathering strength to return as conquerors. Some even claimed they had chosen silence to punish the Council, to make them feel the weight of loss. The truth was known only to the humans, and they did not speak it. Each rumor fed the fires of fear and confusion. Wars grew more violent as species no longer held back, believing the humans would not return to stop them. Pirates grew stronger and trade fell into chaos. The galaxy trembled as if the very stars felt the absence. Admiral Grant looked out at the Ark ships and thought of the generations that would live within them. He knew many of them would never see Earth again. They would build new homes far beyond the rim. They would live with the memory of the silence that had carried them away. He carried the burden of knowing that the galaxy would collapse without them, but he also carried the pride of knowing that his people had chosen freedom over fear. He refused to speak to the aliens because words would only weaken the choice. Silence itself was the message. On a Council world, a heated argument turned violent for the first time in centuries. Leaders shouted over each other, and guards had to intervene. The absence of human voices had left a hole that no one could fill. Every species felt the weight of that hole. Some shouted that humanity had abandoned them and should be forgotten. Others argued that without humans the galaxy was doomed. No vote could end the chaos because the one voice that could calm the storm had already walked away. The silence of humans was louder than all the noise of the chamber. Commander Hayes watched the movement of fleets on his station screens. He saw Ark ships passing into the dark and warships forming shields around them. He felt both awe and dread. He understood that the humans were leaving the galaxy behind, but he did not know why. The silence was eating at him. He wanted to believe there was hope, that one day they would explain, but each day without an answer crushed that hope. He stood before his crew and told them to be calm, but in his heart, he felt the same fear they did. The galaxy was changing, and no one could stop it. The exodus continued week after week. More human worlds went dark. More stations closed. The stars that once shone with human traffic grew still. The aliens who tried to follow always returned defeated. They could not pierce the wall of silence. They could not force the humans to answer. Every day the fear grew sharper. What did the humans know that no one else knew? What future were they preparing for? The questions had no answers, and the silence was the only reply. As the last convoys slipped toward the rim, the galaxy felt the loss like a wound. The council sat in despair. The markets struggled, the borders burned, and the stars themselves seemed colder. The humans had not fought, had not shouted, had not explained. They had only left. And in that leaving was a power greater than war. The silent exodus had begun, and its shadow stretched across every world. The galaxy trembled as it watched the light of human ships fade into the unknown, knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. The galaxy had grown restless in the silence left behind by humanity. And the more days passed, the more uneasy the council became, because humans had not only withdrawn their diplomats, but their fleets, and even their trading ships had quietly vanished. From known space, at first the other races had told themselves that this was only a temporary measure, maybe a political move or a strategy to make others bend. Yet as weeks turned into months, the absence began to feel permanent, and whispers spread from one star system to another about what had happened and what the humans were preparing for in their secrecy. Across the stars, colonies that had once relied on human supplies now found themselves struggling. A colony of the Tarini, who once traded ores and minerals with Earth, now faced shortages of medical supplies because humans had provided most of the medicine to them. The Tarini leaders gathered daily asking why humans had abandoned them. They had once feared the resilience of humans, but now they feared their absence even more, for the void left behind was heavier than war itself. In one station orbiting a red dwarf star, a group of alien merchants argued loudly, their voices shaking with fear. One claimed that humanity had vanished to build a new empire hidden beyond the galactic rim. Another swore that humans had found something ancient, something too dangerous to share with anyone else. Their voices rose, but none had any proof. And yet every whisper fueled the storm of uncertainty. Across the galaxy, on the council, homeworld tension gripped the chamber. The great hall that had once echoed with human voices now felt empty and cold. It was during one of these tense meetings that Senator Vera spoke, her voice sharp with worry. She said, "We should not fool ourselves. Humanity does nothing without purpose. If they are silent, it means they are planning something. And if they are planning something, then we are already too late." Her words silenced the room, and even the proudest empires could not find comfort in denial. Meanwhile, in the quiet corners of space where no council eyes watched, a group of human ships drifted in silence, their engines dormant, their lights dim as if they were dead hulks. Yet inside these ships, men and women moved with quiet precision. One of them, Captain Daniel Hayes, stood at the edge of the command deck, staring into the dark void. His crew worked around him silently. No one spoke of the council. No one spoke of the galaxy they had left behind. Their mission was not to explain their exit. Their mission was to prepare. Daniel had once been a diplomat's guard. He had walked the halls of the council and heard the way aliens spoke about humans with caution and suspicion, and sometimes with hidden contempt. Now, as he looked over the charts on the screen, he knew those same aliens must be wondering where his people had gone. He felt no satisfaction in their fear. Instead, he felt a weight, for he knew the galaxy was not ready for what was coming. He did not know all the details, only that orders had been given, and the orders were clear. Humanity had chosen silence for a reason. In another sector far away, deep under the surface of a barren moon, vast construction yards hummed with life. The ground trembled as machines dug deeper and deeper, hauling metals and crystals from the core. Massive frames of ships larger than anything ever seen before were being assembled there. Thousands of workers, engineers, and soldiers labored, Day and night in silence, the workers never spoke of the council, never spoke of trade. They only spoke of the task at hand. Humanity was not gone, they were only hidden, building something the galaxy had never dreamed of. Back in the council chambers, distrust grew between the races. The Volari accused the Corran of making secret deals with humans. The Corran countered that it was the Volari who had grown silent on their borders. Others accused one another of harboring human fleets. Secretly, paranoia spread faster than truth, and already small skirmishes broke out on distant colonies. Because the absence of humanity had left a balance broken. Humans had once acted as an unpredictable force, a presence that kept others cautious. Without them, the fragile unity was shattering. There were a few who still hoped that humans would return in peace. One of them was Senator Lyra, who had once worked closely with human envoys. She stood in the chamber one day and spoke with a trembling voice, saying, "Maybe they left because we never truly welcomed them. Maybe they grew tired of our suspicion. Maybe they wanted peace somewhere else." Her words hung in the air, but few believed them, for the truth was less comforting. The truth was that humanity never walked away without reason. On the hidden moon, Captain Daniel's fleet received a message, a simple one with no signatures, no explanations, only coordinates. Daniel read the message and turned to his crew. "Prepare," he said. No one asked him for what, because they knew silence was their greatest weapon. They worked together quietly, their faces lit by the glow of the screens, their hands steady on controls. Every movement done with purpose. Humanity's silence was not emptiness. It was discipline, and in that discipline they had become more dangerous than ever. Meanwhile, rumors of sightings began to spread. Some miners swore they saw human ships near the black edge of the galaxy. Traders told tales of convoys of human freighters moving silently, with their lights off, entire fleets drifting through the dark as if they were ghosts. No one could confirm these stories, but the fear grew stronger. For the more the galaxy could not see humanity, the more they believed that something vast and unstoppable was being prepared. On one small council outpost, a young officer named Kale sat in silence, staring at a recording. It showed a distant shape moving past the edge of a nebula. Too far for details, but its silhouette was massive, larger than any known ship. He played the recording again and again, his hands shaking. He knew in his heart it was human. He filed the report, but his superiors dismissed it as a trick of light. Yet he could not sleep for nights afterward, haunted by the shadow of what he had seen. The galaxy was unraveling under the weight of human silence. Trade routes were breaking. Alliances were crumbling. Whispers turned to arguments, and arguments turned to battles. But amidst it all, humanity worked in shadows. Their engineers welded plates of metal. Their scientists tested weapons of strange power, and their leaders spoke quietly behind closed doors. They were united in silence because they knew that when they finally returned, their voice would shake the stars. The galaxy trembled in its own uncertainty, because the silence of humanity had grown louder than any weapon, and stronger than any declaration. The council chambers were filled daily with arguments as one senator after another demanded answers about why humanity had vanished. Entire fleets had been sent to scan human space. But what they found were empty stations, abandoned colonies, and quiet cities that showed no sign of life. It was as if humanity had packed everything and slipped into the shadows without leaving even a trace behind, and that mystery frightened the galaxy more than open war ever could. Rumors turned into obsession, and entire governments invested their resources into searching for humanity. While some claimed they had seen ghost fleets drifting beyond the rim, others swore humans had gone underground, building fortresses inside barren worlds, and a few whispered that humanity had left the galaxy entirely, looking for another place to settle. Each story only fueled the fear because no one could confirm anything. The silence was total and complete. On one forgotten moon, a young officer named Ellen worked late into the night. She had once been a liaison between her people and human envoys, and she remembered their strange ways, their humor, their stubbornness, their endless energy. Now she stared at files and reports filled with contradictory sightings. One said human warships had been seen near a collapsing star. Another said freighters had been spotted moving silently across asteroid belts. None of it matched, and yet she felt in her heart that something greater was coming. She told her commander, "We should not mistake their silence for absence. We should prepare." But her words were dismissed like countless others before her. Far away in the hidden depths of space, human fleets continued their work. Thousands of ships floated in vast formations, engines dark, their hulls painted to vanish against the black void. They moved only when ordered, and, even then, they moved without sound. Their silence was perfect. On the command deck of one of the largest vessels, Captain Daniel Hayes stood with his officers. They had all left behind their families, their homes, their lives, because their leaders had told them the time had come for humanity to step away from the galaxy, to prepare for a future no one else could yet see. Daniel did not know every reason behind the orders, but he trusted them and he trusted his people. Around them were shipyards, built inside hollowed asteroids, their metal frames glowing with sparks as engineers worked without rest. Enormous carriers were nearly complete, their shapes dwarfing anything ever created before. Weapons of a scale that no council race had imagined were being tested quietly in hidden ranges. The workers spoke little, only nodding to one another, their hands moving with speed and purpose. Silence was their law, because silence was their shield. Back in the council hall, fear reached its peak. Empires accused one another of harboring humanity in secret wars, began to break out on the borders, small at first, then larger, as trust shattered. The absence of humans had destabilized everything, because for so long, humanity had been the unpredictable force that kept others cautious without them. The balance collapsed. The Valari fought with the Terrani. The Koran fought with the Zalith. Entire trade networks burned, while the memory of human ships haunted them all. Every senator knew in their hearts that the galaxy was weaker without humanity, but none would admit it out loud. Ellen watched as reports of battles spread across the screens. She whispered to herself, "If they return now, they will find a galaxy broken." And she wondered if that had been the plan all along. She had seen how humans thought differently, always a step ahead, always seeing what others did not. If they had left quietly to let the galaxy tear itself apart, then their return would change everything. She tried to warn her leaders, but they refused to listen because pride blinded them more than fear. In the hidden moon yards, the final preparations were being made. The massive fleet stretched across the void, each ship powered down, waiting for the signal. Silence hung heavy, but inside the crews were alive, waiting. Each soldier, each engineer, each pilot carried the same thought. They had left without words, but they would return with action. Captain Daniel stood before his crew and said quietly, "The galaxy believes. We are gone, but we are not gone. We are waiting, and when the time comes, they will understand what silence meant." Days later, a transmission spread across the galaxy. It was short. It carried no threats, no demands, only a single line: humanity has chosen its own path. And the stars shook with the weight of those words, because no one knew what they meant. Worlds debated endlessly. Some said it was a farewell. Others said it was a warning. But none could agree. Fleets scrambled in panic. Colonies fortified their defenses because fear made them believe the worst. But after that message, no other words came, only silence once more. And that silence was unbearable. In the farthest reaches of space, where no council sensor could reach, the human fleet moved. Like shadows across the void, they did not rush, they did not announce themselves. They simply drifted from one hidden base to another, gathering strength. Their silence became a storm, waiting to break. The officers whispered among themselves, not of if they would return, but of when, because they knew humanity had never abandoned anything completely. They had only stepped away to prepare. Ellen sat alone in her quarters, staring at the stars. She thought of the humans she had once spoken to, the laughter of their voices, the way they argued fiercely and then forgave quickly. She wondered if she would ever hear that again, or if the galaxy would only know the silence they had left behind. She whispered into the empty room, "Please come back." And for the first time, she realized she was not afraid of their return. She was afraid they might never return at all. In the council chamber, the arguments reached their peak as some senators shouted that they must find the humans at any cost, while others demanded they be left alone. Yet none of them truly knew where humanity had gone. Their fleets scoured empty systems. Their spies searched dead worlds. Their leaders dreamed restless dreams of ghostly ships in the dark, but humanity gave them nothing, no answers, no presence, only the weight of silence and the fear of what waited behind it. In the final hours of that year, as the galaxy braced itself for more wars, as empires tore themselves apart, as traitors spoke of seeing shadows moving, through nebulae, the truth was clear. Humanity's silent exit had already changed everything. Their absence had shaken the galaxy more than any battle could, and every world, every leader, every soldier waited in dread and in hope for the moment the silence finally broke, because when it did, the galaxy would never be the same again.